It's not our last episode of the week, but it is another Friday, which means it's time to answer some questions from the mailbag in this edition of Locked On Royals.
You are Locked On Royals, your daily Kansas City Royals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are tuned into another edition of Locked On Royals on the Locked On Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. That's at JOHNYJ_15. You also can catch us on wherever you get your podcasts. That can be Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, Google Podcast. We're on Odyssey and we're on YouTube. Just be sure to hit that follow button and subscribe. If you're a first-time listener and you want to know a little bit more about me and this show, I am based here in Kansas City. I work at Sports Radio 810 WHB, doing some hosting, some co-hosting, and a little bit of producing as well. But when it comes to this podcast, when you click on this link, you know that you're going to be getting 30 straight minutes of Royals baseball. Now, today's show is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use code all lowercase LockedOnMLB to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And I always say this for the first-time listeners. Today is one of the best days that you can join our podcast, subscribe, and start listening to us because it's all about you, the listener. Whatever on your mind, we'll be sure to answer almost all the questions. Today, though, I do feel like we can get to every single question between YouTube and Twitter. So let's head over to YouTube and get question number one from Colson. He says, what is the best strategy to replace Vinny in the lineup? Massey third and Salvi fourth, or Salvi third and DeYoung fourth? Well, I think what we talked about a few days ago with this lineup construction, that Salvador Perez hitting in the 3-hole is probably the best plan moving forward because it gives Bobby Witt Jr. a little bit more protection. Then you're going to want to have a lefty in the cleanup spot, so whether that be MJ Melendez like he is tonight, or Michael Massey, or maybe if you wanted Robbie Grossman there being a switch hitter. I don't think the cleanup spot is as valuable now. I'd rather just have some more protection for Bobby Witt Jr. in the 3-hole, and the best person to put there right behind Bobby Witt Jr. would be Salvador Perez. So I think that's the best way to maximize the value of both of those hitters without Vinny Pasquantino. Hopefully there could be some return in the postseason, assuming the Royals get there. I'm just not holding my breath with Vinny. Next question on YouTube comes from, looks like Keon, I believe that's how you pronounce it. In case there's a mailbag, with football back and NBA and NHL slowly coming back, what can MLB do to better appeal to more people? It won't be as popular, and it won't supplant the NFL in the U.S., but it can have global in it like NHL, but especially with the NBA. So what MLB can do is stop blacking out or having the blackout restrictions. Allow everybody to watch games. Stop putting paywalls behind certain things. I know it's how you make money, but in some situations, fans are just trying to watch the game. And when the MLB blacks out certain fans in certain areas, that's just going to keep the game from evolving. So that's one of the best ways to bring popularity to your sport, is making sure that every game is accessible, or having some deal like NFL Sunday Ticket when you can have access to all these games and not be blacked out in certain areas. The MLB is not very good at that. For some reason, they make it really difficult for fans to watch, and that would be my number one course of action when trying to grow this game. You got to make it accessible to each and every baseball fan out there. So that would be my 2 cents there for your question. Okay, now we're going to jump over to Twitter. This one comes from Waka Season. Do you firmly believe the Royals will be playing baseball in October? What is the percentage chance in your opinion? Well, before the game tonight, the Royals have a 5-game cushion on Detroit with 21 games to go. They'll have 3 more games against Detroit coming up at Kauffman Stadium next weekend. They've got 6 more games left in the gauntlet. They'll see the Twins for 3 at home, and they'll see 3 against the Yankees in the Bronx. So that'll be the end of the gauntlet. Right now, I believe they are 5-8, is it? I think they are 5-9, I believe it is. I think they're 5-9 through the first 14 games. So 6 games left to go in the 20-game gauntlet. And then they will be seeing the Detroit Tigers. Right now, I'd put it over 85% that this team makes it into the postseason. I know the Tigers had a dramatic win last night, a go-ahead grand slam. I mean, it's like a Little League game in the backyard. You drop a scenario just like that, where it's bases loaded, you're down by 3, 3-2 count, 2 outs, and Parker Meadows had the go-ahead grand slam. So the Royals could have walked in the night 6 games ahead of the Tigers. And at that point, I would have put it at about 95%. But if Detroit is a team I'm worrying about, I'm putting it about 85%, mainly because the Tigers get Oakland this weekend and the Royals get the Twins. So if the series doesn't go well for the Royals and it does go well for Detroit, you could be looking at a 2 to 3 game deficit with still 18 games to go on the schedule. So for me, I do think they're going to be playing in October. I feel pretty good about it, but still, it doesn't mean that there's going to be some times the next 21 games that you're sweating it out a little bit. But right now, I'd put it at about 85%. Next question comes from, looks like Kelby. What is the outlook of the Royals outfield after this season? I think that Kyle Isbell is still going to be this team's center fielder because they love his defense so much. I'd imagine Hunter Renfroe is back. I think he'll accept that player option that he has, and he will be the right fielder. Hopefully he can have a healthier season. He'll be back in the lineup tonight. And as for left field, I think that's where the Royals could make a splash. I don't think they're going to go into next year assuming that MJ Melendez is the everyday left fielder. I think they're going to platoon him a little bit, maybe with Hunter Renfroe, maybe find different ways to get him in the lineup. But I could see them making a free agent move to go out there and get a left fielder. They're probably not bringing back Tommy Pham or Robbie Grossman. I don't think it'll be Dairon Blanco or anybody like that. I'd imagine they're going to go through free agency and find a left fielder. I'm going to do more of a deep dive on that the closer we get to the end of the season as who they could be looking at. But since they're in a playoff push, I just really haven't had the time to dive into that. But I do think Isbell and Renfroe will be back as the center fielder and the right fielder. Up next, we got one from Nate. Do you think Pham or Massey should be leading off the rest of the way against righties? I think that Tommy Pham will be the leadoff hitter when they're facing righties. I don't think Michael Massey's going to be leading off anymore. He was only doing that when Vinny Pasquantino was still in this lineup. I'd imagine that when they're facing a righty, Tommy Pham will be leading off. When they're facing a lefty, I think it'll be Robbie Grossman because he can really work the count. He would rather draw the walk, and he's got really good numbers when facing left-handed pitchers this season. So that's what I think those two guys are there for. Tommy Pham's going to lead off against the righties, and Robbie Grossman is going to lead off against the lefties. Jason's Beans asks, KU fan right here, ask, will Tommy Pham be on the team next year? Will Melendez take a starting outfield spot next year? So kind of addressed in the previous two questions, not your fault, just that's where the questions were placed for me. Tommy Pham, I don't see returning. 36-year-old outfielder. I think you're just maximizing the last ounce of baseball that he has left in him. I do believe that Tommy Pham is valuable to this team, but I don't think they'll go into next year assuming that he's going to be an everyday player. But if you could get him for cheap as a bench bat, I could see it, but I'd imagine Tommy Pham wants to be a starter somewhere, and I don't think I would see that in Kansas City. And I don't see MJ Melendez being a starting outfielder next year. I think he will be on this team, but more so as a bench bat that plays anywhere from 2 to 3 times a week. And with the way Matt Quatrero constructs that lineup, he can get in there more often than you would think. But I do not think he's going to be the everyday left fielder. Next one comes from Merville. Will we win a game in October? It's a great question, and I have mulled that over, and it's really hard to tell when I don't know who the opponent's going to be. Is it going to be Houston because they got the final wild card spot? Is it going to be the Yankees because they got the second wild card spot? Or is it going to be the Orioles because the Yankees jump in first place in the American League East? So those 3 teams is who I think the Royals would be playing if they got in there. I do think they'll get one, though. Regardless of any of those opponents, I think there will be an elimination game 3, and the Royals will be on the road for that game. I like Cole Reagans or Seth Lugo in a game 1 or game 2 scenario. I feel good about those pitching matchups, and you can flip the calendar once it gets to October, and it's anybody's game at that point. You really don't know what can happen there. Everything is thrown out the window. Regular season doesn't matter. It's a brand new ball game. It's a brand new environment. The spotlight is a lot brighter in moments like that. But I do think this Royals team can win at least one game in October. The next question would be, can they win a series in October? And I would probably have to wait for sure on that with who they would be playing. Up next, we got 3 questions from Steven, and then we will take a quick break. Number 1, what role does Hampson play from here on out? I think he is there as defensive replacement. I do not see him getting in the games down the stretch here unless it is a blowout because they've got more right-handed bats like Tommy Pham and Yuli Gurriel and even Dairon Blanco I'd put ahead of Garrett Hampson. So defensive replacement or a pinch runner would be my best guess for Garrett Hampson moving forward. Number 2, do you see the Royals making any changes to the bullpen? Probably not. I think if anything, if Michael Lorenzen comes back, Alec Marsh goes to the bullpen in more of a hybrid role, but I think they'll keep Daniel Lynch up there, Carlos Hernandez as well. When Will Smith gets healthy, they'll have a decision to make, but I think Daniel Lynch and Carlos Hernandez have been very good since coming back up from Omaha. And then the question becomes Hunter Harvey. Is he ever going to get healthy? And I don't think he's going to be healthy. I said that yesterday. I wouldn't count on him being back at this point, at least until next year, because they have an extra year of control when it comes to Hunter Harvey. And third, do you think the Royals extend Paul DeJong? Nope. I think this will be it for Paul DeJong in a Royals uniform. I'd imagine he'll try to go and get a starting job elsewhere and probably on a team that isn't contending for the postseason, because that might be an only team out there that would give him another deal. Wouldn't shock me, actually, if the Cardinals went out there and gave him another deal just to have a return and have 25 home runs in their lineup, or 26 home runs, whatever he's got at this point in time. But I do not envision the Royals extending Paul DeJong. We're going to take our first break of the show. When we come back, we still got plenty of more questions to get into in this edition of Mailbag Friday. That's coming up on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our first sponsor today in Ibotta. Are you taking that dream vacation this summer but dreading the cost? With Ibotta, you get cash back on all your purchases, so you can spend more time making memories this summer and less time dreaming about them. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies, even to toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or that fancy dinner that you've been craving. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONMLB when you register. Just go to the App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONMLB. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or the App Store and use code LOCKEDONMLB. We're going to hop right back over to Twitter and get our next set of questions. This one comes from Chiefly Royal. Not sure if you already addressed this, but how do you see the pitching shaking out when the pitchers on the IL come back, being Will Smith, Michael Lorenzen, and Hunter Harvey? So again, kind of goes hand in hand with our last question there from Steven. Hunter Harvey, I just don't think is going to be coming back. I think that back is bothering him too much, and it's given him now 2 setbacks when trying to ramp things back up. Will Smith, they're going to have to make their pick of, do you have Will Smith on this roster, or do you have Daniel Lynch? And I think Daniel Lynch has earned a spot right now. And you have to wonder, is Will Smith coming off the injured list and healthy better than Daniel Lynch and what he's giving you? And J.J. Picollo will have to make that decision. I would imagine that they'll keep Daniel Lynch in that spot because I think his stuff at this point is just better. And then you look at Michael Lorenzen. When Lorenzen comes back, I believe you would have to option Carlos Hernandez at that point in time to keep Alec Marsh in the bullpen, and then Lorenzen goes back to the rotation. Or you piggyback the two with Marsh starting and then going to Lorenzen, or vice versa. So I think they can have a little bit of a hybrid role there for Alec Marsh whenever Michael Lorenzen gets healthy. And I do envision that here in the next few weeks. Luke asked, what's your prediction of this weekend series with the Twins and why? They've got the favorable pitching matchups, and you've heard me say that so many times in doing this podcast, and almost every single time I've been wrong. If I like this matchup, but I don't like this matchup, and of course they lose the game I like, and they win the game I don't like. And it starts tonight. Zebby Matthews is coming off a very poor performance, kind of inflated his ERA because he was having a damn good rookie season before that last time out. But the Royals have seen him. I didn't want to read too much into what Zebby Matthews did against the Royals at Target Field because the Royals didn't have any film on him. They didn't really know what they were going to be seeing. They didn't know what to expect. Yeah, they have minor league film, but that's not really the same. Now they've got some guys that have seen him before, and he's coming off a bad outing, and you got Cole Reagans on the bump, and you got Cole Reagans at home. I like them tonight in this matchup. That always seems to bite me in the ass, but I do like this pitching matchup tonight. Tomorrow could be interesting because Alec Marsh is going, and I think he's looked pretty good since coming back from Omaha. And Bailey Ober's given up 15 runs in 6 1/3 against the Royals this year. However, Bailey Ober's also been a really good pitcher in the second half. So are you going to get Bailey Ober of the second half, or are you going to get Bailey Ober and what he does against the Royals? There's different guys in the lineup now. You don't have Vinny. Now you're adding in Tommy Pham and Robbie Grossman and Yuli Gurriel. There's different guys in there. So I do think there's somewhere of an in-between there on Saturday, but I would probably chalk that one up as a loss. Then it comes down to Sunday. Simeon Woods-Richardson, who wasn't very good in his last outing against Tampa Bay, and Michael Wacha. And I just like betting on Michael Wacha. So I'm going to roll the dice here, be a little bit more optimistic. I think the Royals take 2 of 3. That off day came at the right time. I think they're rested up now, and can really make this strong push to close out the regular season. But good question there from Luke. Josh asks, been a stressful couple of weeks, so something more fun. What do you see as our rotation next year? Do you think Waka is back? Do we re-sign Lorenzen? Just wanting to know your guess on the 5 starters to begin the year. I got Cole Reagans. I got Seth Lugo. I think I got Brady Singer. I think Michael Waka opts back in. And that 5th spot, I think will come down to either Chris Bubich or if Kyle Wright can win that job. But I think Kyle Wright's going to be a bullpen guy if he even makes the team out of spring training, because recovering from shoulder surgery, that can be much easier said than done. If Chris Bubich is seen as more of a bullpen guy, I don't think I would hate seeing Michael Lorenzen back on a 1-year deal, but he's also pitched well this year. So he might want to try to get a 2-year deal elsewhere and try to get a little bit more money. And the Royals just need to find a 5th starter out there. And maybe you look in-house at Chris Bubich, or you look in-house with a Daniel Lynch or a Kyle Wright. But Chris Bubich, to me, might have the front-running spot right now. I think they really like what he can become. We saw what he was able to do at the beginning of the year in 2023. And I think that with as good as his stuff can be, I'd like to see it play in the 5th spot. So it might come down to Bubich and Marsh and Kyle Wright and Daniel Lynch. But I think right now Bubich could win that 5th spot going into 2025. Adam asked, while a 7-game losing streak understandably makes it look worse, but does an 8-12 record splitting with Minnesota and New York over this difficult 20-game stretch ultimately look okay? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I had brought up yesterday or 2 days ago, it's all about hanging on at this point. If you split with Minnesota and New York, that still means that Detroit and Boston and Seattle have to play really well, play above 500 in these next 6 games, and I'm just not counting on that. So you go 8-12, I think that's surviving. I think that's treading water, and at that point, after 6 more games, there's 15 games left. And if you still lead by 5 games, I don't know how those other teams are going to keep pace with it unless Detroit comes into Kansas City and sweeps the Royals. But the Royals get the Pirates next weekend. They'll get the Tigers. They'll get the Nationals. They'll get the Giants. And then they'll get the Braves to close out the year. So a lot of teams in that stretch that aren't playing great baseball, and at that point will be completely out of the postseason race. So to me, I think it's lining up for the Royals well on those final 2 weeks of the season. But to me, 8-12 is just fine. I think that's treading water. That's avoiding a sweep. I'd rather take 2 of 3 against Minnesota and taking 1 in New York if I had my pick of those next 6 games. Luke asks again here, I've seen our starting pitching look taxed. Is it that or just pressure to go deeper into the game and falling under the pressure due to the lack of confidence in the pen? Well, I actually think that the rotation has looked good, even in the 7-game losing streak. I mean, you got 2 7 innings of 1-run ball, or 2 outings of 7 innings of 1-run ball from Seth Lugo in the losing streak. Brady Singer had a quality start in Houston and was 1 out from a quality start against the Guardians. Cole Reagans gave up 5 runs in 1 inning, but he struck out 10 guys in 5 innings of 1-hit ball at Minute Maid Park. Alec Marsh, I think, had some bad defense behind him, but I didn't really hate what he did. And Michael Waka had 5 innings of 2-run ball against Cleveland. So I don't think they're fatigued right now. I think it was that the offense made them look a little worse than what they were doing. I mean, they just had other guys that were out dueling them. And I think that this rotation still is pretty strong, still is pretty healthy. And you just keep your fingers crossed with that moving forward. I know I knocked on wood and then the Royals started getting hurt. So I'm going to knock on wood a lot louder. I know a listener told me to do that. You can see my screen shaking just to know that I was knocking on wood, not to jinx the Royals this time around. But I don't think that rotation is too fatigued. I think they're still ready to go for the postseason, again, assuming that they can get there. Tom asked, over under 1.5 total outfielders currently on the roster that will be on the team's roster for opening day next year. I think that's a good question there. I'll take the over because I think Kyle Isbell and Hunter Renfroe are back. So that's automatically 2. I don't think they're going to wipe out the outfield and try to go get everybody else through free agency or through trade. They like Kyle Isbell's defense. I think they want Hunter Renfroe back for a fully healthy year. That remains to be seen if it can happen. And they might go out there and add another bat, a left fielder through free agency or through trade, just to give a little bit of relief to MJ Melendez, who I just at this point don't think is an everyday left fielder. I think he can actually have a really good year being the team's 4th outfielder and being a really powerful bat off the bench. But good question there from Tom. Charles asked, are the Tigers a serious team to be worried about? We did touch on this a little bit not too long ago. I think they are the scariest of the bunch of who's chasing the Royals, but I'm still not sold on that offense. They had a dramatic win last night. They got 5 runs the night before, but blew that 5-0 lead against San Diego. They are getting healthier. Riley Green is back. Kerry Carpenter's back. Parker Meadows is there as well. But still, it feels like their rotation can only take them so far. And the Royals will have a chance to bury them at Kauffman Stadium next week, or 2 weeks from now, because this is Friday. They'll have their opportunity to bury him, and as long as Tarek Skubal not pitching, you should feel good about where the Royals are at, although they have hit Tarek Skubal well in 2024. I like the rotation. I like the bullpen. I don't think the offense is good enough to get this to a game or two deficit for them when trying to face off against the Royals. I think the Royals have, some favorable matchups coming up, but they do got to take care of business first against Minnesota before they can look ahead to Detroit. I wouldn't be too concerned at this point in time until that lead, or if that lead gets down to about 2 games. All right, we're going to take our final break of the show. When we come back, we will wrap it up with our final round of questions in this Mailbag Friday. But before we do that, thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. For your second listen, enjoy the Locked On MLB podcast. Host Pat Sullivan, a.k.a. Sully, is here daily to provide national expertise with his trademark humor to help you get ready for the MLB playoffs here in the dog days of summer. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day on Locked On MLB, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. When we come back, we will wrap up this edition of a Mailbag Friday on Locked On Royals. You are tuned into Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jack Johnson, and you can find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Want to give a shout out to our final sponsor and our title sponsor in PrizePicks. It's America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. It's also the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps, on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. And you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. And PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It is guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Well, I think we'll be able to get to our last set of questions here on Twitter. I think we got about 6 or 7 to go here. So we'll swing it over to Aiden. Do you think the Royals can clinch a playoff spot before the last week of the season with a decent gap that they have on Boston now? Well, you got to worry about Boston. You got to worry about Detroit. You got to worry about Seattle and maybe, just maybe, Tampa Bay. I would plan on the Royals clinching in that final week if they do get there. The series I've been eyeballing because of this 5-game lead is the National Series, which is a weird place to clinch a playoff spot in because the Royals never go to Washington. But the way I've mapped it out, if they can stay the course, play 500 ball, just survive, I'd imagine that final series, or that final week, that has the National Series and the Brave Series, I would think the Royals could clinch it there. But they would really have to pull away and play some damn good baseball here over the next few weeks to be able to clinch the second to last week of the year. I'm sure you're asking that because the Royals play the Giants at home, and that's the last home regular season series. It would be great to see that, but right now I think I would circle that series in Washington as where the Royals could be clinching it because the Nationals aren't very good, and that would kind of line up with how many games are left in the year and what the deficit might be at that point. If the Royals play 500 ball, that's kind of where I've been eyeballing. But good question for Maiden. Kate asked, do you think we will fall out of a wild card spot? No, I really don't. I think that the sample size is a lot larger now where you look at Kansas City, Detroit, Seattle, Boston, and Tampa Bay. The Royals have been holding this wild card spot for a long time now. Really, the majority of the second half. It was very early on when they took that spot, and they never relinquished it again. So to me, I think they'll either be a number 2 wild card team or a number 3 wild card team. I've kind of written it off now that they'll win the division. It can always happen. I'm just focusing on getting the foot in the door at this point in time. So I think they'll either be heading to Houston as the final wild card team, or they'll be heading to New York or Boston as the number 2 wild card team. This one comes from Eli. Which realistic free agent target would you add next year, including Roki Sasaki and other Japanese players that would be posted? I guess I'll go on the fly here and pull up Spotrac and see. I believe we did this for some bullpen arms, but if you're looking at starting pitchers or big name free agents for next season, I would have to go just off this list right now because I haven't really dove into it just yet. They're not going to be in the Juan Soto sweepstakes. They're not going to be in the Garrett Cole sweepstakes. I think he has to decline a player option there. Max Scherzer's an unrestricted free agent. Verlander, same thing. I don't see the Royals being involved with those guys. Goldschmidt, no. Teoscar Hernandez, maybe. As a left fielder there, what he was able to do for the Dodgers, I just don't know if he fits the profile of what the Royals want. Alex Bregman, no. Pete Alonso, no. Michael Conforto, I would actually love to see in a Royals uniform. I think he would be one of those bounce-back guys, and I saw him in person this year in San Francisco. I was actually impressed with what I was able to see from Michael Conforto, so I think that can make a lot of sense. From the starting pitching market, again, I think they're going to be looking for a number 5 out there, and they'll probably look in-house, so I don't see them signing any starting pitcher out there. Mark Canha could make a little bit of sense there as another bench bat they could add in. Maybe Justin Turner to go to give you a little bit of a pop off the bench, a guy that can get on base. But right now, I would need to do a deeper dive there, and I probably will once the season concludes either in September or it concludes in October. But I do appreciate the questions about looking ahead to next year already. Gene asks, do you expect Harvey and or Lorenzen will be able to return and make a positive contribution during the stretch run? I think Michael Lorenzen, yes. I'm going to go no on Hunter Harvey just because he's already had 2 setbacks when trying to throw off the mound. Blake asks, have you ever attended the Royals minor league game? Being from Omaha, we go to Storm Chasers games about twice a month. My best memory there was back in 2016 when the Royals played an exhibition before the season. Love the podcast. Well, appreciate the kind words, Blake. And yes, I have been to a Storm Chasers game. I was there for a Royals exhibition. I was there actually for work, and the Storm Chasers beat the Royals. I think that was right before the 2019 season. Not pretty at all. And it was also a lie that the Storm Chasers were good with a lot of minor league talent there, because that just ended up not being the case. And then I also saw a Naturals game. I was down in Springdale back in 2000, and it might have been around the same time, to be honest with you. It might have been a 2019 game as well. I was there to see Khalil Lee, who ended up getting traded in the Andrew Benintendi deal. But I do strongly recommend going to minor league games if you're a baseball fanatic, because you can't get closer to the game than a minor league game. It's just like spring training, the sights, the sounds, getting up and close to a prospect, a guy you've been eyeballing, always fun to see, and the atmospheres are just very traditional to baseball. I've always enjoyed it. Yeah, Storm Chasers games are phenomenal, and I do want to get out there to either a Quad Cities game or a Columbia game at some point in the near future. Just might have to be next season. But good question there from Blake. And lastly, Walking W asked, do you think the Royals will bring back any of these players that we picked up or traded for? We have Ursig for a while, but the others, I believe, are on one-year deals. Also, do we bring Hunter Renfroe back when his contract is up? I think I might have gotten this wrong earlier. I thought he had a player option. I think he might take that player option from the Royals and come back for another year because he was banged up. To me, though, I feel like Renfroe can be back. I think Walker will be back with that player option. If any of those guys that return on a one-year deal, Michael Lorenzen could, but he also just took a one-year deal with Texas this year. So I think he might be looking for more security with how good he looked this year. So Lorenzen, I would say, could be somebody looking to because it's starting pitching depth. For the bullpen, Schreiber will be back. Hunter Harvey will be back. I believe Chris Stratton and Will Smith will be on their way out. A couple other guys that have years of control will be staying in that bullpen. Paul DeYoung's not going to be returning. Tommy Pham, Yuli Gurriel, Grossman, none of those guys are going to be coming back. So to me, I think Michael Lorenzen would have the best chance. But even then, I'm not sold on it. I'd probably give it like a 20% chance of him returning next year. Hey, the Royals won't have to be as aggressive in the free agent market because they've got a lot of guys coming back and a lot of guys they like to build around. So they won't need to overspend everywhere. They can probably bolster this bullpen a little bit more, and that's what I envision them trying to do this upcoming offseason here in a few months. Well, that's going to do it for another edition of Locked On Royals and the Locked On Podcast Network. I've been your host, Jack Johnson, and you can always find me on Twitter or X at JohnnyJ_15. Thank you for making Locked On Royals your first listen today. Now go check out the Locked On MLB podcast. Prepare for the Fall Classic with Sully, who has it all covered every single day. And you can find the link to Locked On MLB in the description so you don't need to search it. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, you enjoy this weekend series against the Twins. I'm going to try to be out there on Sunday, but should be some great crowds. They'll be on Fox, the national game tomorrow night. And we're only a few hours away from first pitch between Cole Reagans and Zebby Matthews, game one of a pivotal series against the Twins. This won't be our final episode of the week. We'll still have one more, and I plan to do that on Sunday evening. But until then, you take it easy, Kansas City.